I am transgender. Growing up, it was scary. I didn't have anyone to talk to. My family didn't understand. It's a struggle to be real. Society, for some reason, doesn't want people to be real. I've come across a lot of transgender children in the world, and I want to do everything in my power to make sure that they don't go through the things that I went through. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what you look like. It just matters, are you a good person? I want someone to know it's okay to be transgender. It's okay to discover that you're not transgender if you think you are. It's okay to be gender fluid. It's okay to be gender neutral. It's okay to be gender non-conforming. It's okay to be male. It's okay to be female. It's okay to be gay, straight, lesbian. It's okay. Just please be a good person. Be kind. Hello everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Kelly's Quest. I am so fortunate today to have with me Senator Jamie Eldridge from the state of Massachusetts. And the reason I'm so excited to have you on the show, Senator, is because this past Saturday, October 1st, I became your equal in the eyes of the laws of the state of Massachusetts. And I'm hoping to discuss with you during this episode exactly how I became your equal, because believe it or not, in parts of the country, I am not people's equals. There are laws that are specifically designed against me as being a transgender woman. And I wanted to really find out, how did Massachusetts do this wonderful thing that made my move to this state 2 years ago worthwhile? So, and I know you were a big part of it, so thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and thank you for having me on the show, and also to tell your story, because I will say part of the reason that we got to this Saturday, the law protecting transgender persons from discrimination in public places was the stories of persons like yourself. So thank you for having me on and telling your story, and I'm looking forward to learning more about your journey from Tennessee to Massachusetts.
Thank you, because it was a journey, and like I said, it's all worthwhile. It's like I have truly landed in the best place I could possibly imagine to land in the United States of America.
That is music to my ears, so that's good to hear.
I mean, my first winter here, Senator, though, was 2 winters ago, when there was 9 feet of snow from February to March, and I saw grown men that have lived here their entire life cry. And I kept thinking, I'm going to go back to Tennessee. I can't do this. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, wait a minute, I would rather have 9 feet of snow on the ground than the discrimination that I faced there. And it truly is. It's a blessing to be in this state, and it's one of the things that, like you said, with my story helped this happen, but it wasn't really just my story. There was a lot of input from other people.
Yes.
Was it youth that told their stories? Was it adults that told their stories? Was it a combination? How did that work? How did the outside influence of people, their stories, how did that work in reality, in action at the Senate?
Yeah, great question. And I will say, I came into the legislature in 2002. I was sworn in 2003. And sort of, when you get elected, you never know what issue you're going to take up. That year, 2003, was when the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ruled that same-sex marriage was the law of Massachusetts. And so I supported the decision, always supported same-sex marriage, but there was an effort by some of my more conservative colleagues to change the Constitution to say that marriage was strictly between a man and a woman. And so I spent the next 6 years working with my colleagues to defeat that amendment. So I was very proud to do that and to prevent that discrimination from happening.
So you're one of the people that got me to Massachusetts without you even knowing it, because that was one of the influences that got me here. It's like they were one of the leading states on marriage equality. So thank you for helping me get here.
Well, that's great to hear, and I will say I think that's one of the things we've been saying is that not prohibiting discrimination is part of what makes Massachusetts what a great place to live, to raise a family, to have a business. is that, you know, it's a very tolerant state, but that doesn't just happen on its own. It requires policies like the Transgender Anti-Discrimination law that just went into place.
Right.
So post defeating the constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage, the next issue that sort of the LGBT community brought up was the fact that transgender persons didn't have protection in Massachusetts. So, you know, after we had protected marriage equality, that was the next issue we took up. And so in my first term as a senator is when we passed the bill prohibiting government discrimination against transgender persons. That was 2011. So I was proud to be part of that effort, and that really was, I think, for the first time, the transgender community coming to the State House and telling their stories. And so that was very powerful. But the law in 2011, unfortunately, the public accommodations provision was removed because.
Why was that removed, do you think?
I think, unfortunately, there were still some of my colleagues that they were comfortable with the notion that government shouldn't discriminate against anyone because of their gender identity. However, they still had an issue with a business owner, whether or not that person would be able to employ or have a transgender person come into their business, which is really hard to think about the fact that there was still nervousness about that in the 21st century, but there was.
Right.
And you and I have talked about the fact that unfortunately in other states, you know, they're going the other way. They're actually, you know, encouraging or legalizing, if you will, discrimination against transgender people.
It makes me sad. It really does. It
does, yeah.
I went to North Carolina this summer. Well, I went to East Tennessee this spring, and North Carolina had just passed the HB2 law.
Yes.
And so being a transgender woman that was new to being open and authentic, I've only been open and authentic for 2 years, Senator, because I moved to Massachusetts, and because of this wonderful stuff that you've been doing to help me. I mean, now that I know this, I have my job at a school because you helped pass the bill in 2011 that said a government entity had to give me a fair shake at it. So without even realizing it, I owe you more than I thought that I did, and the citizens of Massachusetts. But I went down to East Tennessee, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go to North Carolina and use the bathroom in the women's restroom. And to think that I felt that powerful about something that I drove an hour out of my way to go sit on a toilet and go to the restroom. That's not something that, I mean, that's something that's how powerful this is to me. This is how important it is to me to prove to people that I'm a woman. And
absolutely.
And for the reaffirmation of the state of Massachusetts on that, for me, is just, it's humbling. It truly is humbling. I mean, I'm so thankful. I'm so fortunate for all of the good things that have happened in the 2 years that I've been here, and it's because of this wonderful stuff that's, that's going on. And I'm very blessed. I'm very, very blessed because of all of the stuff that's happened up here. And I know that right now, though, this law is just passed, and I'm now your equal.
Absolutely.
But just like you were saying with marriage equality, there was pushback.
There was pushback, and it really was people's personal stories. So we talked about, you know, sort of how did this law pass this session? Because I will say there was more pushback against this bill than in 2011. I think because for some people in Massachusetts, it was becoming a little more personal. There was, you know, you mentioned going to North Carolina, you know, to use the bathroom. There was this obsession, unfortunately, by opponents of the anti-discrimination bill about whether a person based on their gender identity can use a certain bathroom. And so it was named in very unfortunate terms as the quote-unquote bathroom bill.
Yes.
And so we really had to push back on that. And so I did get, you know, some calls from people that said, you know, I support the fact that government shouldn't discriminate against someone for their gender identity, but I'm still uncomfortable with the bathroom provision or, you know, just any other public accommodation. So having to explain, you know, the implications of the law. You
became an expert in a hurry, I would imagine.
I had to, because there were definitely people calling that were, you know, opposed to the bill. And so certainly had individuals like yourself coming to the State House to testify. I will say it was also very powerful to have a lot of families bring in their children,
Right.
who the son or daughter realized that they were a different identity, and some of these kids were 6, 7, 8 years old, but they knew at that age. And so to have them come into my office and not always be able to completely tell their story because they're 6 or 7,
Right.
but the parents talk about they wanted to see that the law and the state saw their son or daughter in the same eyes as any other child or any other person in Massachusetts. So that was extremely powerful.
I can only imagine, because the reason I moved here was, like I said, for me to become an equal citizen. But I work with these children that you're talking about that come
Right.
to the State House. I volunteer at a camp called Camp Aeronautic in New Hampshire. And those kids, to see them be advocates for themselves on a political front was so overwhelming to see. It's like, I have to help these kids. I mean, someone else as an adult who does have the words, hopefully, to help say what they are struggling to say. Because while a parent is the most loving person a kid could ever have, only a kid knows their true, authentic self.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so for me to be able to explain my story so that someone else might be able to understand their child a little bit better, or understand the kid in their school that's a classmate or a teacher, that's what I'm here for. And you're helping me to do that, and I'm very, very grateful, Senator. I'll say that 1,000 times today, I'm sure.
I won't complain.
Okay. One of the things that I noticed when I moved here, and this was coming into play, was there was also some professional sports entities that got involved with it. Could you kind of talk about? I'm a huge athlete, sports fan, love all sports. I've loved New England Patriots since I was 8 years old. I think it was when Stanley Morgan from the University of Tennessee played for the Patriots, and he was my favorite UT player. So I became a Patriots fan way back then.
That's great.
And so I don't know particularly of the sports teams that supported it off the top of my head, but could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really speaks to not only how broad the sort of LGBT rights coalition is in Massachusetts, but also how strategic the coalition and community has been. Is that, of course, we talked about the stories of transgender people talking to their legislators
Right.
about their stories, so that had an impact. But quite honestly, you have legislators that perhaps didn't immediately change their position or connect from that perspective, but perhaps they were very connected to sports. So they might be a big fan of the Boston Bruins or the Red Sox or the Patriots. And I think there's a sense that athletes, sports teams are the mainstream, right? That they're heroes to kids. They're people that people look up to, and to have those organizations announce, in part with the work of person who I think is arguably one of the best attorneys general in the country, very quickly, Maura Healey, did a lot of outreach with those professional sports teams to have them sort of in unison say that we're in support of the anti-discrimination transgender bill. So that really had, I think, an impact on legislators that might be either more moderate or conservative to say that actually supporting the rights of the transgender community is a very mainstream thing. It's the right thing to do. It's not a quote-unquote radical issue. And so I think that sort of normalized the issue, if you will, to some legislators and some members of the public that love the Patriots like you or I do, but maybe they didn't know a transgender person, or they were still uncomfortable with aspects of the bill.
Right, yeah, it's hard to break down that. It's misinformation or being uninformed, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Once you meet someone, if they're a good person, it's hard to dislike that person as a person.
Absolutely.
So also on top of having these role models, which, Tom Brady and everybody is a role model for New England. If you're from East Tennessee, you have a different opinion of Tom Brady, which I like because I pick on my friends that are Peyton Manning fans down there.
Oh, yes.
Because, they're all huge Peyton Manning fans. And so it's a bit of that give and take with it. But yeah, role models do influence it. And especially when they, like you said, the word normalize is a hard word for me to,
I
because
understand.
I find it so difficult to think that you were sitting in a chamber deciding where I could go to the restroom, whether or not I could go eat at a restaurant and somebody could just say, sorry, we don't like you, you can't be here. And it blows my mind that it came to the point that I had to be talked about in that basic of a sense of human dignity of, can I eat, can I go to a restroom? And thank goodness the state of Massachusetts understood that I need to go to the restroom and I need to eat and I need to feel safe doing both of those things. And for people to think that I'm going to do something nefarious because of this new transgender accommodation law, I think is misinformation or uninformed people. I don't really know that there's a whole lot of people that truly think that I'm going to do something nefarious once they meet me, but they've got this concept that they've not been taught about. So the role models, I consider you a role model.
Well, no, thank you. And I will say, speaking of role models, because, I talked about the fact that, when I first became a legislator is when the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, ruled that same-sex marriage was legal. But I really think back to, sort of why I already had those values once elected to sort of support equal rights for everyone. And it really does come back to my parents. And I talked about this when the 2011 law was passed to prevent government discrimination against transgender persons, is that I distinctly remember when I was fairly young, probably 10 or 11 years old, my dad coming home from work one day and saying that one of his coworkers had transitioned and had changed their name and had transitioned to I think it was a transgender woman. And as a 10-year-old kid, sort of taking that in, but I think the biggest influence for me at that moment, sitting at the dining room table, was that my dad treated it as no big deal. It was something that, he observed. He saw that his coworker had transitioned, and, there was nothing that had changed his, friendship with that person. And I think that really sent a message to me as I grew up that, that's how you should treat everyone equally, regardless of where they stand, if you will, in life. Wow. So that was a big impact.
So lucky draw.
Yeah.
To get the parents you got.
Yes, absolutely.